Have you ever noticed how the most powerful people in a room are often the quietest? They're the ones who don't react to every little thing. They're the ones who maintain their composure when everyone else is losing theirs. They're the ones who act as if nothing bothers them. I want to share something with you today that has transformed my life and the lives of thousands of others. It's a principle so simple yet so profound that once you understand it, you'll never see the world the same way again. The principle is this: be silent and act as if nothing bothers you. Now, I can already hear some of you thinking, that's it? That's the big secret? Yes, that's it. But don't be fooled by its simplicity. This principle contains within it the power to completely transform your reality. When I first discovered this principle, I was at the lowest point in my life. I was reacting to everything and everyone around me. Every small criticism felt like a personal attack. Every minor setback seemed like the end of the world. I was exhausted from the constant emotional roller coaster. Perhaps you can relate to feeling this way. Then one day, I observed someone who seemed completely unbothered by the chaos around them. While everyone else was stressed and reactive, this person maintained a calm, almost mysterious demeanor. They didn't engage with drama. They didn't defend themselves against every accusation. They simply remained silent and acted as if nothing bothered them. And what I noticed was fascinating. People were drawn to them. They commanded respect without demanding it. They influenced without trying. That's when I realized something profound. Our power lies not in how we react, but in how we choose not to react. Think about water for a moment. When you throw a stone into still water, what happens? It creates ripples, disturbances. But the water doesn't fight back. It doesn't try to push the stone away. It simply absorbs the impact and returns to stillness. That's the kind of power I'm talking about, the power of non-reaction. Now, let me be clear about something. Being silent and acting as if nothing bothers you doesn't mean being passive or allowing yourself to be mistreated. It's not about suppressing your emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's about something much more powerful. It's about choosing your reactions consciously rather than responding automatically. When you master this principle, you gain something invaluable. You gain control over your internal state. And when you control your internal state, you begin to control your external reality. Think about the last time someone criticized you. What was your immediate reaction? Did you feel defensive? Did you feel the need to explain yourself or prove them wrong? Did you perhaps become angry or hurt? These are all normal human reactions. But here's the thing. These reactions give away your power. When you react emotionally to criticism, you're essentially saying, yes, your opinion has power over me. Your words can control how I feel. But when you remain silent and act as if nothing bothers you, you're saying something very different. You're saying, I determine how I feel, not you, not anyone else, just me. Let me share with you what happened when I first began to apply this principle in my own life. I was working in an environment where one particular colleague seemed determined to undermine me at every turn. In meetings, they would question my expertise. Behind my back, they would plant seeds of doubt about my capabilities. My initial reaction was to fight back, to defend myself vigorously, to prove them wrong, to win the approval of others. But then I remembered this principle: be silent and act as if nothing bothers you. So the next time this colleague challenged me in a meeting, instead of becoming defensive, I simply acknowledged their perspective with a slight nod and continued with my presentation. I didn't try to prove them wrong. I didn't get emotional. I acted as if their comment hadn't bothered me at all. The result was immediate and surprising. The energy in the room shifted. People who had previously been swayed by this colleague's opinions suddenly seemed more interested in what I had to say. Over time, as I continued to practice this principle, something even more interesting happened. This colleague's attempts to undermine me became less frequent and eventually stopped altogether. Why? Because when you don't react, you don't give energy to the very thing you're trying to avoid. It's like a fire without oxygen. It simply cannot sustain itself. But the benefits of this principle extend far beyond handling difficult people. When you're silent and act as if nothing bothers you, you conserve an enormous amount of energy. Think about how much mental and emotional energy you expend when you're bothered by something. The ruminating thoughts, the emotional turmoil, the conversations you replay in your head. All of this drains you of the energy you could be using to create, to grow, to thrive. When you stop allowing external circumstances to dictate your internal state, you free up that energy for things that actually matter to you. You become more focused, more productive, more creative. You become a force to be reckoned with. I've seen this transformation in countless individuals. People who were once constantly stressed, reactive, and drained have become calm, powerful, and energized simply by applying this one principle: be silent and act as if nothing bothers you. Now you might be wondering, how exactly do I do this? How do I remain unbothered in a world that seems designed to provoke reactions? It's a fair question, and I want to share with you some practical strategies that have worked for me and for thousands of others. The first strategy is to create distance between stimulus and response. When something happens that would normally bother you, pause. Take a breath. Create a space between what happens and how you respond to it. In that space lies your freedom to choose. Most people react automatically without this pause. Something happens and boom, they're triggered into a reaction. But when you practice creating this space, even if it's just for a second or two, you give yourself the opportunity to choose a different response. You might still choose to express displeasure or disagreement, but it becomes a choice rather than an automatic reaction. The second strategy is to practice perspective shifting. When something bothers you, ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? Will it matter in 5 months? Will it matter in 5 weeks? Will it matter in 5 days? More often than not, the answer is no. Most of the things we allow to bother us are insignificant in the grand scheme of our lives. When you realize this, it becomes easier to remain unbothered. The third strategy is to focus on what you can control. Much of our stress and reactivity comes from trying to control things that are simply beyond our control. Other people's opinions, external circumstances, past events. When you shift your focus to what you can control, your thoughts, your actions, your responses, you reclaim your power. I remember working with someone who was constantly bothered by the negative comments on their social media posts. No matter how many positive comments they received, it was the negative ones that kept them up at night. I suggested they apply this principle: be silent and act as if nothing bothers you. Instead of engaging with these negative comments, defending themselves, or trying to change the commenters' minds, they simply ignored them. The result? The negative commenters eventually moved on, while the positive community around their content grew stronger. By not feeding the negativity with their reactions, they starved it of the very energy it needed to persist. This principle can be applied to virtually any area of your life. In your personal relationships, when you stop reacting to every perceived slight or disappointment, you create space for genuine connection. In your professional life, when you remain calm and composed in the face of challenges, you inspire confidence and trust. In your relationship with yourself, when you stop being bothered by your own perceived failings or imperfections, you create room for true growth and self-acceptance. But I want to be honest with you about something. This isn't easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. Our brains are wired to react. Our emotions are designed to signal threats and opportunities. Going against this natural tendency requires practice and persistence. There will be times when you fail. There will be situations that get under your skin, people who know exactly how to push your buttons, circumstances that seem designed to test your resolve. In those moments, be gentle with yourself. Recognize that this is a practice, not a perfection. The goal isn't to never be bothered by anything. The goal is to increasingly become the one who chooses how to respond rather than the one who reacts automatically. It's about expanding that space between stimulus and response. Little by little, day by day. I've been practicing this principle for years now, and I still get triggered sometimes. The difference is that now I catch myself much more quickly. I notice the trigger, I pause, and I choose a different response. Sometimes that response is silence. Sometimes it's a calm, measured reply. Sometimes it's removing myself from the situation entirely. But it's always a choice rather than an automatic reaction. And here's something fascinating I've noticed. The more I practice being silent and acting as if nothing bothers me, the less things actually do bother me. It's as if the act of not reacting externally gradually changes what happens internally. Things that would have sent me into a tailspin years ago now barely register as a blip on my radar. This is the transformative power of this principle. It doesn't just change how you appear to others, it changes how you experience your own life. Now, I want to address a common misconception about this principle. Some people hear be silent and act as if nothing bothers you, and they think it means becoming cold, detached, or unfeeling. That's not what this is about at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. When you're not constantly reacting to every little thing that could potentially bother you, you actually become more present, more engaged, more connected to what truly matters. You're not wasting your emotional energy on things that don't deserve it, which means you have more to give to the things and people that do. I've seen relationships transformed by this principle. Partners who were caught in cycles of reactivity and escalation learn to create space between stimulus and response. They learn to choose their reactions rather than being driven by them. As a result, conflicts. I've seen careers transformed by this principle. Professionals who once allowed every setback, every criticism, every challenge to throw them off course, learn to remain steady and focused. They develop a reputation for being reliable, composed, and trustworthy, qualities that inevitably lead to greater opportunities and success. I've seen lives transformed by this principle People who were once at the mercy of their reactions, bouncing from one emotional extreme to another, develop a sense of inner peace and stability that radiates outward into every area of their lives. The truth is, being silent and acting as if nothing bothers you is not about denial or suppression. It's about liberation. It's about freeing yourself from the tyranny of automatic reactions so that you can choose responses that actually serve you and others. Think about the people you most admire, the true leaders, the visionaries, the game changers. Do they react to every criticism? Do they get defensive when challenged? Do they allow themselves to be provoked into emotional responses? No. They remain calm, centered, and focused on their vision, even in the face of opposition. They understand, either consciously or intuitively, the power of being silent and acting as if nothing bothers them. Now, let's talk about how this principle can help you navigate some of life's most common challenges. Consider conflict, for instance. Most of us have been taught that when conflict arises, we need to address it immediately. We need to clear the air, to make our feelings known, to stand up for ourselves. And while there's certainly a time and place for direct communication, there's also tremendous power in strategic silence. When you're in the midst of a conflict and emotions are running high, being silent and acting as if nothing bothers you can be the most powerful move you can make. It prevents escalation. It gives you time to gather your thoughts. It allows the other person to exhaust their emotional reactivity. And most importantly, it keeps you from saying or doing things in the heat of the moment that you might later regret. I've used this strategy countless times in both personal and professional conflicts, and it has never failed me. By remaining silent and unbothered in the face of provocation, I've been able to transform what could have been destructive confrontations into constructive conversations. Or consider criticism. We all face criticism from time to time, whether it's from colleagues, friends, family members, or even strangers on the internet. Our natural response to criticism, especially if we perceive it as unfair or inaccurate, is to defend ourselves. We want to set the record straight, to correct misperceptions, to make sure others don't believe something about us that isn't true. But here's what I've learned. When you defend yourself against criticism, you often end up giving it more power and reach than it would have had otherwise. Your defensiveness signals to others that there might be some truth to the criticism, that it has struck a nerve. On the other hand, when you remain silent and act as if the criticism doesn't bother you, you send a very different message. You signal confidence in who you are and what you stand for. You communicate that you don't need external validation or approval. And paradoxically, this often leads others to question the validity of the criticism rather than your response to it. I'm not suggesting that you should never respond to criticism. Sometimes a calm, measured response is appropriate, especially if the criticism comes from someone whose opinion you value, or if it relates to something of genuine importance. But even then, the principle holds. Respond from a place of calm composure rather than emotional reactivity. Let's also talk about setbacks and failures, which are inevitable parts of any meaningful journey. When things don't go as planned, when you face obstacles or experience defeats, it's natural to feel disappointed, frustrated, or even discouraged. These emotions are normal and human. But how you respond to these setbacks makes all the difference. If you allow yourself to be visibly bothered, if you complain, blame others, make excuses, or give up, you diminish your own power and potential. You signal to yourself and others that you're at the mercy of external circumstances rather than in control of your own destiny. When you practice being silent and acting as if nothing bothers you in the face of setbacks, you maintain your composure and your momentum. You treat obstacles as information rather than impediments. You learn what you need to learn, adjust your approach if necessary, and keep moving forward. I've applied this principle during some of the most challenging periods of my own journey. There have been times when it seemed like everything was going wrong, when one setback followed another in rapid succession. In those moments, remaining silent and unbothered wasn't about denying the reality of the challenges. It was about refusing to give those challenges power over my internal state or my ultimate direction. And what I discovered was this: when you don't allow setbacks to visibly shake you, you inspire confidence, both in yourself and in those around you. People want to support someone who they believe will succeed despite obstacles, not someone who seems defeated by them. Now, I want to address another dimension of this principle that's equally important but often overlooked: the internal work required to truly embody it. Being silent and acting as if nothing bothers you isn't just about external behavior. It's about cultivating a particular internal state, a state of genuine equanimity and self-possession. Without this internal foundation, the external practice becomes mere posturing, a facade that's easily penetrated. So how do you develop this internal state? It begins with self-awareness. You need to become intimately familiar with your own triggers, your own patterns of reactivity, what kinds of situations or interactions tend to provoke an emotional response in you, what thoughts arise in those moments, what sensations do you notice in your body? This self-awareness is crucial because you can't change what you don't notice. When you can catch yourself in the moment of being triggered, when you can observe your own reactivity as it's happening, you gain the power to choose a different response. I practice this self-awareness throughout my day. When I notice myself beginning to feel bothered by something, a comment from a colleague, an unexpected delay, a perceived slight, I pause and observe. I notice the thoughts that are arising, the emotions that are being triggered, the physical sensations that accompany them. I don't judge these responses or try to suppress them. I simply observe them with curiosity and compassion. This practice of mindful observation creates space. Space between the stimulus and your response. Space between the trigger and your reaction. And in that space lies your freedom to choose. Another essential aspect of the internal work is reframing. How you interpret events and interactions has a profound impact on how bothered you feel by them. When someone criticizes you, for instance, you can interpret it as an attack, a threat to your self-worth or reputation, or you can interpret it as valuable feedback, an opportunity to learn and grow. The event itself, the criticism, remains the same, but your interpretation changes everything. I've found tremendous power in the practice of reframing. When something happens that could potentially bother me, I consciously choose to interpret it in a way that empowers rather than diminishes me. This doesn't mean adopting a simplistic positive thinking approach where you pretend that everything is wonderful when it clearly isn't. For example, if a project I've been working on doesn't achieve the results I hoped for, I could interpret this as a personal failure, a reflection of my inadequacy. That interpretation would certainly bother me. Or I could interpret it as valuable data information that will help me refine my approach and ultimately achieve greater success. Same event, different interpretation, vastly different internal experience. The third aspect of the internal work is emotional regulation, the ability to experience emotions without being controlled by them. Emotions are a natural and valuable part of the human experience. The goal isn't to stop having emotions, but to develop a healthy relationship with them. When you practice emotional regulation, you can feel angry without acting in anger. You can feel hurt without being defined by that hurt. You can experience disappointment without being paralyzed by it. This capacity creates a kind of internal buffer zone, a space between what you feel and what you do. I've developed this capacity through various practices, including meditation, deep breathing, and physical exercise. These practices help me stay grounded and centered even when strong emotions arise. They enable me to experience emotions fully without being swept away by them. This internal foundation, self-awareness, reframing, and emotional regulation, makes the external practice of being silent and acting as if nothing bothers you authentic and sustainable. Without it, you might be able to maintain the appearance of being unbothered for a while, but eventually the facade will crack. With this foundation, however, the external practice becomes a natural expression of your internal state, rather than a mask you're trying to maintain. You're not pretending to be unbothered. You genuinely are less bothered because you've developed the inner resources to navigate challenges with grace and equanimity.